This video was sponsored by Surfshark. More on them in a bit. After a life of constantly moving around, having meltdowns, making false reports to the police, and supposedly gang connections, an elderly 73-year-old man had reached the limits of his sanity. With that, he decided to carry out one of the worst crimes imaginable on a group of senior citizens. Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark. I really think Surfshark VPN is the best VPN out there. I think at this point we've all heard of a VPN, a virtual private network. They keep your online activity and identity safe by encrypting all of the data that gets sent between your device and the internet. They keep your data protected from all sorts of parties, like big companies or even cybercriminals. Using a VPN to encrypt your online data helps you secure your personal info in a number of situations, like when you're using public Wi-Fi. That can be a goldmine for hackers. Masking your IP address is also great for privacy in general. The VPN makes sure that your download history, your city, and even your country aren't linked to your identity. Now, Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in 100 different countries. By acting like you're in those other countries, you can access and unblock all sorts of content libraries and streaming services that are only available there, like getting the full Netflix library without having to worry about what is and isn't available in your country. Of course, this all means that you can use the VPN to bypass censorship and geo-restrictions as well. So go on over to surfshark.com/diretrip or use the code diretrip at checkout to get an extra 4 months of Surfshark. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Mass shooting and other similar acts of mass violence really do seem to be occurring one after another these days. While many have come to associate these types of attacks with schools or political radicalization, some of them are pretty far from what you might expect. This case is a pretty good example of that, with the major motivating factor seeming to be a 73-year-old man's grievances with a dance studio. Hu Can Tran was born on August 15th of 1950. It is debated on as to where he was actually from. There were conflicting reports that he was from either China or Vietnam. Given his Vietnamese name, many people have theorized that he was actually ethnically Chinese but born in Vietnam. Either way, it has been most widely stated that he was born to a wealthy family in Vietnam about 5 years before the war broke out. Hu Can came to study electrical engineering, but after joining a gang, he started getting into more and more trouble. He moved to Hong Kong later at some point. However, he kept up with the gang life. Hu Can told one of his good friends, William Chen, that when he was a teenager, he kidnapped people and even chopped a man's hand off after getting into a fight with him. He also said that his family sent him to Taiwan to keep him out of jail. Then again, this is only the story that he has told himself. According to another one of his friends, Hu Can was actually the black sheep of his family, often falling short of what his family expected of him. Due to his penchant for gang activity and his lack of drive, his father even threatened cutting him off from his inheritance entirely if he didn't change. In the late 80s, possibly due to these conflicts with his family, Hu Can decided to pack it all up and move out to the United States. He first settled in Texas, getting a number of different jobs just to get by. For a while, he was a carpet cleaner. Then he took a shot at being a truck driver. After that, he packed up and moved to California to try life out there, moving to San Gabriel in 1989. For a while, it seemed like he was on a good path. He even got his U.S. citizenship in 1990. Still, his life in the U.S. wasn't much easier than his life was in Asia. While he may have left the gang life behind him, he struggled to make ends meet. He lived in a very small home in San Gabriel and continued to bounce from job to job. He tried working at a supermarket for a while, but struggled to hold the job down just as he did with the others. So he tried an auto parts company. Then he tried working as a property manager for an apartment complex. He was all over the place. In November of 1990, Hu Can came into his first bit of trouble with the law in the USA. This was when he was arrested by the San Gabriel police for unlawful possession of a firearm. In a stroke of irony, Hu Can had actually been the one to call the police himself. He had reported a possible burglary at a liquor store and told the officers that he could lead them to where he last saw the suspect. Just in case he was up to something, the officer asked if he could give him a quick pat-down beforehand. They ended up finding a Roan RG-40 .38 caliber revolver inside his jacket. Hu Can claimed that he had only grabbed it for protection while pursuing the robbery suspect. Eventually that charge was dropped, but it was only a sign of things to come. Hu Kan continued to call 911 pretty often. Sometimes he would only give the operator a quick mumble before hanging up the phone. When he actually carried out the calls in full, he would mainly be reporting noisy neighbors or claiming to have witnessed domestic disturbances. One of these was an incident in 1992 when he called the police saying that he was receiving threats on his life. When the police came out to talk to him, he said that he was dating a woman who was going through a divorce and that her husband, who said that he had ties to a Taiwanese gang, was planning to come and kill him. Again in 1993, Hu Kan called the police once again to report that he had found 49 shotgun shells in his front yard, which he said was another threat on his life. He didn't actually request for the police to come out though, instead only telling them that he wanted to make them aware of the incident in case something happened later. The police ended up calling this supposed Taiwanese gang member of a husband who told them a very different story. He said that Hu Kan had actually been harassing him for a while, calling his phone all night repeatedly for a month straight. For years, Hu Kan kept making similar claims against different people. In 1999, he called the police to complain that he had been receiving a constant barrage of phone calls for the last 9 months. He said that whoever was on the other end of the line would remain silent before hanging up. The police tried to tap his phone to gather information, but after installing the tap at his house, they were surprised to see that it broke down almost immediately after they left. Of all the troubles in his life, self-imposed or otherwise, Hu Kan Tran did have one thing that he enjoyed, and that was dancing. While he attended a couple of different dance studios, he seemed to frequent the Star Ballroom Dance Studio in Monterey Park, California the most. Monterey Park is a city about 7 miles east of Los Angeles, nestled in the San Gabriel Valley. 2/3 of its residents are of Asian descent, being the first city in the whole country with a majority Asian population. The Star Ballroom Dance Studio is a Chinese-owned dance studio that offers lessons as well as casual dancing. In general, the place is most popular with older Asian Americans, with a lot of the participants being in their 70s. Hu Kan was fairly confident in his dancing ability, telling others that he had been trained by professionals back in Texas. This was where he would meet his good friend, William Chen. Hu Kan himself had adopted a more American-sounding name, going by Andy. As Andy, he would usually dance with women who didn't have a partner. He saw himself as a bit of a Casanova, cracking a big grin whenever he landed a dance with one of them. William didn't see anything wrong with it, saying, "Andy always had a smile on his face, and he was friendly to other people. He liked to make friends." Just before the turn of the millennium, Hu Kan even went on to meet who would become his wife at Star Ballroom. By now, he was such a regular that he was informally teaching lessons. He walked up to this woman and offered her some free lessons. She was happy to accept. It was a pretty fast-paced whirlwind romance, with the couple getting married fairly quickly after in 2001. Feeling that his life was on the upswing, Hu Kan decided to open his own company, Trans Trucking Incorporated, where he worked as a driver. However, it wasn't too long before Hu Kan came to change once again. Much like everything else in his life up until this point, he couldn't stick to this new life for too long. He told his friend that he couldn't get along with his wife's family and that he had been secretly recording her to gather evidence for an upcoming divorce. According to his wife, Hu Kan was never violent but was very quick to anger. At the dance studio, he would grow furious with her whenever she missed a step, saying that it made him look bad. After a few years together, she felt that her husband didn't like her anymore, with it being fairly evident that he had lost interest in her. After 4 years together, Hu Kan dissolved his company and filed for a divorce. This divorce was granted in 2006. Still, despite all that was happening, he continued to attend the dance studio. It seemed to be both the only thing he was good at and the only thing that he actually enjoyed. He started trying to meet more women at the studio, telling them that he would give them free lessons under 2 conditions. 1, they had to show up every day, and 2, they could only dance with him. For some reason, some women actually agreed with those demands. One of these women started to complain to her friend that Hu Kan was too controlling before ending their classes altogether. This had happened a few other times by this point. She told him that if he kept up with this act, he wouldn't have anyone to dance with anymore. Hu Kan's relationship with the other regulars at the dance studio was slowly deteriorating as well, and it was because of the way he chose to conduct himself. He began to complain and badmouth the other dance instructors heavily, saying that they were haters because he was stealing their potential students and hurting their wallets. In particular, he came to hate the studio's manager, a guy named Mingwei Ma. He started to attend another dance studio called Lai Lai too, but he clashed with the regulars and the instructors there as well. Hu Kan's complaints about the other people at these studios only continued to grow in frequency and intensity. He said that the other instructors were saying, in his words, evil things about him. However, the people he spoke to would usually notice very quickly that he was actually the one being hostile and starting arguments. He was very easy to grow irritated, didn't seem to trust anyone, and didn't even seem to like anyone there. People began to wonder why he even showed up at all. William Chen noticed this behavior more than any other, given their closeness. He noticed that Hu Can was growing very paranoid, saying that he was in fear of his own family. He told William time and time again that his family was going to kill him, especially his brother. He even got to the point where he changed his phone number every month, feeling that people were listening in on his phone calls. William felt that, from what he was hearing, these fears were completely irrational. It seemed like Hu Can just wanted to be a victim, but it also seemed like he really did believe what he was saying. William said he always had a problem of the mind. A guy named Adam Hood came to live with him, sometimes describing himself as a tenant and sometimes as a roommate. He was in the position to listen to many of Hu Can's ramblings, saying that he had, quote, a lot of vendettas against people. These vendettas could be in relation to any number of things: money, love, and what he felt was people alienating and picking on him. In particular, he still hated the people from Star Ballroom and Lai Lai even years after. Adam said, he kept complaining to me that the people there were not friendly with him. After this continued for far longer than it should have, Hu Can stopped going to the Star Dance after having attended for 10 years at the least. He packed up and sold his home in San Gabriel in 2013. He told his friends that he had given up, that he was going to drive around the United States and live out of his van. After he left, his friends weren't even really sure of what happened to him. Some of them heard that he had actually gone to live with his brother, who supposedly had threatened to kill him. This bit of time is still a bit of a mystery, with very few people being able to account for him for the next several years. Eventually, Hu Can did come to settle down once again. 7 years later, he bought a mobile home in a town called Hemet, a suburb about 85 miles east of Los Angeles. Now 73 years old, Hu Can continued his trend of bothering the police in Hemet as well. He visited the station twice in a row on January 7th and January 9th of 2023, saying that his family was poisoning him and out to steal his money. It's highly likely that, by this point, he hardly had any money to his name. The police asked him to return with some sort of evidence, anything at all, but he never did. He just dropped it entirely. Little did they know, his madness and hatred were about to hit the boiling point. "12 days after his visit with the police, Hu Can decided that he would once again try and attend the Star Ballroom dance studio as well as Lai Lai. His reasons, though, were anything but positive. It was now January 21st, and near the dance studio, tens of thousands of people were gathering up to celebrate the Lunar New Year. It was Lunar New Year's Eve, and it was all set to be the beginning of a large 2-day festival, one of the biggest in Southern California. When it came to Saturday night, the festival was all set to end at about 9 p.m. and pick up the next day. The Star Ballroom was holding a celebration event themselves from 8 p.m. to 12:30 a.m., going a little bit longer than the outdoor festival. That night, the studio was packed with senior citizens. That day, Hu Can decided to begin the roughly 2-hour drive out to Star Dance to visit one last time. Given the way he was looking that day, it was likely that very few of the regulars would even recognize him. By all accounts, he looked rough. He looked much older than he even was. Some said that he looked homeless. Hu Can wasn't heading out to the dance studio for any positive reason. He had nothing but mass murder on the mind. With him, he carried a semi-automatic pistol, a Cobra M11-9 with an extended high-capacity magazine. He had bought the gun all the way back in 1999, but he had never registered it. The kind of magazine he was carrying was actually illegal in California. He had also done something even more illegal. He had attached his own, bulky, homemade silencer to the gun that he had built in his trailer as well. He pulled into the parking lot of the Star Ballroom dance studio and parked his car. He opened the door and stood up. In the parking lot was a woman, 65-year-old Mai Mai Nan. He pulled up his gun, aimed down the sights, and shot her right there. With nobody else in the parking lot, he was ready to make his way into the studio. It was now 10:20 p.m. Dozens of people were still inside the dance hall, many of them still dancing and enjoying themselves. This was when Hu Can, wearing a black coat and a winter cap, walked inside. One witness claimed that he was there to find his ex-wife, saying that he approached her there. Other witnesses said that he didn't say a word. What we do know is what happened next. Hu Can lifted up his gun and began to fire. One witness said, "I just saw him, to shoot, to hold the gun, so I run, I hide myself. He found his wife there. He started shooting everybody when they danced." Hu Can began shooting indiscriminately in all directions. Ming Wei Ma, now working as a dance instructor, decided to rush Hu Can and take him down. Despite his efforts, he didn't make it. Hu Can shot him dead on his approach. With people hiding, injured, and bleeding out on the dance floor, Hukan calmly continued to walk among the victims. He lifted up his gun and began to shoot many of them a second time while wandering around. A dancer named Yulan Kao did his best to shield a few others from the gunfire. Seeing this, Hukan aimed up his gun and shot him several times. Only 2 minutes had passed. Hukan took his leave, fleeing the scene. The police received their first call immediately after, and they were on the scene in less than 3 minutes. They were shocked to see a large number of people pouring out of the building and into the streets, screaming all the way. The authorities were able to find 10 people injured on the scene. They were loaded into ambulances and rushed to the hospital. Another 10, though, were not so lucky. They had already passed away. 5 men and 5 women had died right there in the studio. They were 72-year-old Yulan Kao, 57-year-old Zhu Juanyu, 63-year-old Lilin Li, 65-year-old Mai Mai Nan, 62-year-old Hong Yingjian, 68-year-old Valentino Marcos Alvaro, 72-year-old Mingwei Ma, 67-year-old Moi Dai-ung, 64-year-old Wen Tao Yu, and 76-year-old Xiaoling Yao. 3 of them were Taiwanese citizens, 2 were from China, 1 was Filipino-American, 1 was from Vietnam, and 3 of them were born in the United States. One more victim, 70-year-old Diana Manling Tom, was among the critically injured who were rushed to the hospital. However, she ended up passing away from her injuries, bringing the death total up to 11. With all of that, Hukan Tran's night still wasn't over. Hukan had driven about 3 miles away to a city called Alhambra. About 17 minutes after the massacre at Star Ballroom, he made his way up to the Lai Lai Ballroom and Studio on Garfield Avenue to continue his revenge. He made his way inside with his gun, showcasing his large homemade suppressor. This is where he locked eyes with a 26-year-old man named Brandon Say. Brandon's family owned Lai Lai, and he just happened to be in a small room near the lobby when Hukan entered. Standing there in shock, he saw the large gun in Hukan's hands. However, it seemed that Hukan just remembered that he probably needed to reload and started messing with the gun. Brandon shook his feelings of shock in that moment and rushed towards him. He was able to wrestle the gun out of Hukan's hands. Brandon took the gun out into the lobby, yelling at Hukan to get out. When Hukan tried to grab the gun back, Brandon cracked him over the head with it. Still, Hukan persisted, leading to Brandon turning his back towards him to keep the gun out of his reach while fighting him off with his left hand. Brandon, being the one with the gun at this point, was clearly in a position of power now. He shouted, "Get the hell out of here, I'll shoot." Eventually, Hukan realized that he couldn't fight off this much younger man with a gun and decided to make a run for it. He ran back out to his van while Brandon called the police. This gun, unlike the other, was registered to Hukan Tran himself. When the police came out to Lai Lai, they were able to identify him based on the CCTV footage and the registration very quickly. Not only that, but they now had a clear description of his van as well. They now knew exactly who they were looking for. Still, Hukan had driven pretty far away already. Their search wouldn't be ending too soon. In a move that has resulted in controversy, the police waited a whole 5 hours to inform the public that an armed and dangerous shooter was at large in the area, although they did inform various government agencies of the fact. The new police chief, who had only started work 2 days prior, said that he didn't want to wake up the community to tell them that they were on the lookout for an older Asian man, someone who would have blended into the area very easily without a clear description. They were also very unsure of the information that they had themselves, given that they had been talking to 40 different witnesses with differing stories, some of which struggled to speak English at all. It was now early Sunday morning and the police were receiving a new tip. A man fitting the description of the shooter had walked into a local emergency room, looking pretty beaten and battered, asking for treatment for his wounds. The hospital notified the authorities, having heard of him on Twitter. This man waited in the lobby for a while before getting spooked and leaving without receiving treatment. It still hasn't been confirmed without a shadow of a doubt that this was the shooter, but it is very likely. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department issued a special bulletin and posted a wanted poster asking for help finding their suspect. The image showed Hukan Tran from a few different angles, showing him in his black coat and hat. However, by the time it ended up on Twitter, some of the police officers just happened to come across his van in the street. It was now 10:20 a.m. the next morning, about 22 miles away from the attempted shooting at Lai Lai. Seeing a van that fit the description perfectly of what the shooter was driving, the police ran the plates. They noticed that the plates were stolen, having actually belonged to the same make and model of the van, but one that was 8 years older than this one. They forced the van to come to a stop in the street. Then they began their approach. On their way to the driver's side door, they heard one final bang. Thinking that he may be shooting towards them, the police called for tactical units to come out to the scene. The SWAT team surrounded the van and began to initiate a standoff. However, from their armored vehicles, they noticed that they had no reason to worry any longer. Hu Can Tran was slumped over the steering wheel of the van, unmoving. He had used his third gun, a Norinco handgun, to finish himself off. It was now all over. A helicopter landed nearby as officers in full military garb approached the van, opened the passenger door, and climbed inside. They confirmed that there was no longer any threat. No traps, no other gunmen. With that, the SWAT vehicles began to move away and head out. Hu Can was pronounced dead on sight. He was quickly identified without a shadow of a doubt as their shooter. The police began working to piece together the puzzle that was Hu Can's confusing life, hopefully in order to find out why he did what he did. They had no idea what had pushed this 73-year-old man to the point of becoming a mass killer. They obtained a search warrant for his home at the Lakes of Hemet West, a senior living community pretty far out from where the shooting had actually occurred. At his home, they found another gun, a Savage Arms bolt-action rifle, and a whole lot of ammunition. They also came to see that he had been building more homemade silencers. Most importantly of all, they found a letter written to the police in Chinese. However, the police still have never released the contents of what that letter contained. They have, however, said that it hasn't helped them find a motivation for his attack. Hu Can Tran had become the second oldest mass killer in the history of the United States, with only one man, Cary Hal Diaz in Yuma, Arizona, only beating him out by a few months. The second day of Monterey Park's Lunar New Year festival was cancelled. In fact, security was upgraded at other similar parades across the country, even as far away as Miami and New York City, given that they still didn't know the killer's motivations in carrying out the attack. Moments of silence were held for the victims at these other festivals as well. Those in Monterey Park erected a large banner reading "United We Dance" in remembrance of the victims, and it would continue to remain there for months. A GoFundMe page was created in order to help the victims and their families. It went on to raise over $1 million. As the case continued, the president at the time, Joe Biden, asked for the FBI to provide support to the local authorities. He ordered flags to be held at half-mast at the White House as well. He offered his condolences to the people of the community. The mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, said that the shooting was absolutely devastating. The governor, Gavin Newsom, said that he was monitoring the development of the case very closely. He went out to meet some of the victims recovering in the hospital as well. A few days later, he visited Brandon Say to commend him for his heroism in stopping the attack. He said, "This remarkable young man who, without any hesitation, though with moments of fear, took it upon himself to save countless lives. Who knows how many lives he saved?" Brandon said that he was happy to be complimented, but he didn't want to put too much focus on himself. He wanted the victims to have the spotlight instead, saying that he knew some of them personally. He said, "They come to our studio. It's a tight-knit community, and I hope they can heal from this tragic event." Hu Can's neighbors began to speak to the media about how they saw him. One of them, Pat Roth, told the media that she knew he was a ballroom dance instructor in the past and that he would still sometimes come up to dances in their senior community. She said, "Didn't seem like he'd harm a fly, you know. He wasn't a big guy. He'd pet your dog when you walked by." The police in Hemet didn't have any records of Hu Can being involved with the law in the community. They had never even been called out to his home, by him or otherwise. Adam Hood, the man who had lived with Hu Can in the past, wasn't quite as surprised. He had actually taken him to court previously to get his security deposit back after leaving the property. He was shocked to hear about the shooting, as anyone would be, but he wasn't too shocked to hear about who had committed it. He said, "It's a surprise because it's hard to believe that someone would commit such a horrible murder, massacre." Before adding, "It's not a surprise to me because if I knew this guy well, I knew sooner or later he could do something crazy." This shooting came to be known as the deadliest mass shooting in the history of Los Angeles County, taking that spot from the previous Covina Christmas massacre in 2008, a case in which Bruce Jeffrey Pardo killed 9 people, many of which were his family. A Democratic representative of Monterey Park named Judy Chu revealed some federal legislation that would aim to give more funding and translation services in order to strengthen their already existing red flag laws, hoping to make them more of a viable option in communities with less English ability. It was to cover a bit of a blind spot in the red flag laws where you basically required a fairly good English ability in order to report someone for making statements that could indicate that they were homicidal. The investigators, still puzzled, decided to hand over the CCTV footage, witness and victim statements, the letter in Chinese addressed to the police, and more evidence over to the FBI. Those at the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit have been working to determine Hu Can Tran's motive. They also have refused to comment on the letter or divulge what it contained. This has led to frustration in the community. If it were mundane and irrelevant to his motivations, such as being his last will and testament, they should have had no trouble revealing that. That fact has led many to believe that it is indeed significant in some way. One of the survivors of the attack on the Star Ballroom dance studio has shared in this frustration. Lloyd Glock, who had been hiding under a table watching the entire shooting unfold, fears that the survivors will never know the truth behind the attack. He said, "Do you remember at the very beginning when all these things happened? The police already said that the truth may probably never come out. We'll probably never know why he did it. We can only guess." Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you found it interesting, please give it a like, it really helps me out in the algorithm, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Once again, thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in the description below to get a great discount. These days I have a merch store, so if you're interested in getting your hands on some cool Dire Trip merchandise, feel free to try it out. If you want, go ahead and follow me on social media, because if anything were to ever happen to this channel, that would probably be the only way you'd ever hear about it. It's also the easiest way to contact me if you need to. I also really appreciate when people subscribe to my Patreon. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Channel memberships are up too, and you can get the same benefits there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle. Thank you, and good night.